Coming in at 10, Uncle Ben. R.I.P. Uncle Ben. Still miss you. Of course, Far From Home has a callback to Uncle Ben. You can't have a Spider-Man film without him. It would be criminal. Anyway, there is a very subtle nod to the fallen uncle at the beginning of the film when Peter is packing for a school trip. If you look very closely, you will notice that Peter's suitcase is sporting the initials BFP, aka Benjamin Franklin Parker. So sweet. Coming in at 9, May's new job. In Far From Home, May has a brand new job, a job that is a fun callback to the PS4 video game and the comics. May now works for a charity, and as we know, in the video game she worked for a homeless shelter called Feast. That was until she found out that the founder, Martin Lee, was actually a crime lord called Mr. Negative. Later on in life, May also went on to spearhead the Ben Parker Foundation, named of course after her late husband, and was funded by Peter's brief tenure as an industrialist. Fun times. Coming in at 8, Shield to Sword. In the second post-credit scene of the film, it is revealed to us that Fury is up in space hanging out with the Skrulls and taking a much needed break from all this superhero business. Now, Fury collaborating with the Skrulls could be that the MCU is building toward the debut of Sword, a Shield's offshoot which is tasked with protecting Earth from extraterrestrial threats, a problem that ensued following the events of Avengers Infinity War. Coming in at 7, throwback to MJ. Spider-Man Far From Home ends with Peter and MJ web-slinging around New York City, finally having the date he so desperately wanted. However, this is actually a fun callback to the pre-MCU Spider-Man movies, which saw the original duo soar through the Manhattan skies, but instead of Zendaya it was Kirsten Dunst, and instead of Tom Holland it was Tobey Maguire. However, the twist this time is that MJ absolutely hates Peter's web-slinging and vows to never do it again. And while on the topic of web-slinging, there was also a fun little Easter egg that referenced the PS4 video game. In the same web-slinging sequence, Peter snaps a fun pic of himself in his Spider-Man getup, using the exact same pose that his video game Spider-Man self also did. Coming at 6, J. Jonah Jameson. That's right, our favourite controversial journalist is back, and once again played by J.K. Simmons, a highly requested return that finally came true. This beloved character appears in the first post-credits scene. However, it seems that in this iteration of Spider-Man he is not a newspaper journalist, but instead an online news source, similar to the character portrayal in the PS4 Spider-Man game. This appearance is huge, as it is the first time that we have ever seen an actor reprise their role in a separate iteration of an MCU film. Does it mean that what we saw in the Sam Raimi films isn't in fact canon? Who knows? It's likely that this was just a fun nod to the fans who have loved this character since the very beginning. Coming in at 5, Captain Marvel cameos. Spider-Man Far From Home has a handful of callbacks to the Captain Marvel solo film, which was surprising but ultimately makes sense, and you'll see why. In one scene, Fury gets annoyed with Peter, who is questioning where the rest of the Avengers are, even Captain Marvel, with Fury biting back, "Don't invoke her name, lol." And in another scene, Fury references hidden Kree sleeper cells that are on Earth. All bizarre references, but they make sense once the second post-credit scene rolls around, which reveals Fury and Maria Hill to be Skrull shapeshifters, aka Carol's old friends, which allows Fury to take a much needed vacay up in space. Coming in at 4, other Avengers. Now, Far From Home doesn't feature really any other supers aside from our good old SHIELD buddies, but it does reference some of our favourite Avengers, including the ones we lost. The film opens with a student tribute video to the fallen heroes following what the kids are calling the blip, aka the snap. We see Iron Man, Black Widow, and Captain America, even though we know he isn't really dead, just old. The movie also references a handful of other heroes, including Thor and Captain Marvel, who are up in space, Doctor Strange, who is busy doing business, who knows what business, and even Pepper Potts, who had signed an oversized check that Happy donates to May's charity. However, the best has to be when Happy finds out just how hard it is to be Captain America, when he attempts to throw a shield at one of Mysterio's drones, and, of course, fails. Coming in at 3, the Elementals. The Elementals began as the central antagonist of Far From Home, however they were quickly established to be fake, and all a ruse by the villain Mysterio. However, these villains are actually a very real threat in the comics, with their first appearance being in Supernatural Thrillers issue 8 back in 1974. The Elementals are made up of Hellfire, the leader who can generate fire and flames, Hydron, a villain with aquatic powers with the ability to control water, of course, Magnum, who has the ability to manipulate earth, minerals, and rocks, and of course Zephyr, the only female in the team who has the power to control wind, sky, and fire. Though they were faked in the film, it's pretty cool that we got to see all of these foes' abilities play out. Coming in at 2, the Marvel Multiverse. At the beginning of the film, when we're first introduced to Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, he claims to be from an alternate universe, which suggests that the MCU will soon be delving into the concept of the Marvel Multiverse. Now, although this turns out to be a lie and that Beck actually hails from Earth, it still doesn't diminish the possibility. The multiverse was also hinted to in Doctor Strange by the Ancient One. It's also worth noting that the Earth discussed in Far From Home are all callbacks to the comics, with Earth 616 being the name of Marvel's classic comic book universe, and Earth 833 the home to Spider-Man UK. The UK, aka the place where the battle between Mysterio and Spider-Man takes place. And finally, coming in at number 1, the sequels. Now, this is an Easter egg that even I missed. It's subtle, guys, real subtle, so keep your eyes peeled during the final scene of the movie as Peter is swinging around the city on his way to meet up with MJ. On his way, he passes an advertisement that reads, I quote, 1, 2, 3, ? And we can't wait to show you what comes next. While this is incredibly vague, many think this is referencing the future of Spider-Man in the MCU. Basically confirms that a Spider-Man sequel is coming, even though that was already accidentally confirmed by Tom Holland in a press interview. It also hints that Peter's story will be taking an even crazier turn going into Phase 4, and I for one cannot wait. Coming in at 10, the Overlook Hotel. As we know in the Shining movie, Dan Halloran is killed by an axe-wielding Jack, just as he arrives to help Danny at the hotel. Now that specific axe shows up in Doctor Sleep when Danny uses it to attack Rose, but there's never any mention of it as the specific weapon that killed Halloran. It is unconfirmed whether in the world of Doctor Sleep he died, that is left up to your interpretation, and his presence does provide some Easter eggs. For one, when he meets Danny to discuss The Shining in 1980, he sits in the same position that Danny will later sit while discussing the power with Abra in 2018, since Danny ends the film as a ghost visitor to Abra in the same way that Dick first appears. Coming in at 9, the film and the novel. Now, some continuity between the novel and the film version of The Shining were too tough to simply adjust. Examples being the Overlook Hotel doesn't really exist in the Doctor Sleep novel. Instead, Dan and Abra wander through the wreckage as they battle Rose the Hat and the True Knot. That is because in the Shining novel, the Overlook Hotel is destroyed at the end once Jack realizes what he's done and battles against the possession, burning down the hotel in the process. Once again, Flanagan makes a nod to this narrative by having Dan basically do the same thing, starting the boiler in order to start fire. Coming in at number 8, Room 217. The first hospital room that we see Azzy the cat go into, also where Dan confronts a dying patient, is numbered 217. In the book version of The Shining, the scary scenes are set in room 217, not 237 like the film. However, Timberline Lodge, which serves as the model for the Overlook Hotel, asked Stanley Kubrick to change room 217 to 237 so future guests wouldn't be scared of their own real room 217. In at number 7, Danny Torrance. As most Mike Flanagan fans will know, he loves to pack his films and TV projects with actors he has previously worked with, and as you might have guessed, this is the same for Doctor Sleep. Many of the members of the True Knot also appeared in The Haunting of Hill House, including Catherine Parker, Robert Longstreet, and Selena Anduze. Meanwhile, Bruce Greenwood and Carol Strucken, who played Dr. John and Grandpa Flick in Doctor Sleep, also appeared in Gerald's Game, another Flanagan film. However, you may or may not recognize one very important face, that of Danny Lloyd. He appears as an onlooker during a Little League game midway through the film, and if you don't know, Danny Lloyd played Danny Torrance in the original Shining. I should probably mention that. In at number 6, callbacks to the novel. As you would expect, there are several callbacks to the book version of The Shining that never made it into Stanley Kubrick's movie. An example being when Dan calls Jack/Lloyd a false face. In the Shining novel, while young Danny is trying to escape Jack, he calls him a false face that the hotel is wearing. This is of course a pivotal moment in the book because Jack is briefly able to control himself to tell Danny to run, something that never made it into The Shining and I wish it did. Maybe that's why Stephen King hated the film. Coming in at 5, Wes Craven. As far as Doctor Sleep goes, the movie is intensely concerned with dreams and nightmares, with the two main characters, Dan and Abra, experiencing gruesome and upsetting nightmares. The big problem being that their nightmares tend to result in real-life consequences, which might sound familiar to a few horror lovers out there. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's famous horror franchise about Freddy Krueger, a villain who haunts dreams and kills victims in his dream world, which in turn kills them in reality. Similar to Rose the Hat and the True Knot, Flanagan paid homage to this classic horror with an Elm Street sign that's visible off of the main street in Frasier, the town where Dan spends most of Doctor Sleep. Keep your eyes peeled. Coming in at number 4, The House of the Devil. Doctor Sleep pays homage to yet another modern horror movie, The House of the Devil. It's not all Stephen King Easter eggs in this movie. Flanagan actually took the time to acknowledge folks like Ty West, the director of films like The Innkeepers, The Sacrament, and The House of the Devil. The latter starred Jocelyn Donahue as a babysitter in the 1980s who takes a job that goes very very wrong very quickly. Donahue also appears in Doctor Sleep as Abra's mother, so it makes sense that Flanagan would pay homage to her role in the House of the Devil. Coming in at number 3, Other Worlds. As we know, Stephen King is the master of horror as well as the master of franchising. Almost all of his novels and short stories take place within the same universe, specifically the Dark Tower universe, which encompasses everything from It to Doctor Sleep and of course the Dark Tower novels. Now, although the references are small, Doctor Sleep is filled with Dark Tower Easter eggs. For example, when Dick visits Danny at the hospice, he tells him car is a wheel, a quote straight from the Dark Tower novels. Not only that, but two competing forces in the Dark Tower universe, the Tech Corporation and Lemerck Industries. Tech shows up in Doctor Sleep on the bus at the station. Meanwhile, Lemerck Industries owns the park where the true not torture and murder a young baseball player. Coming in at number 2, Mike Flanagan Easter eggs. Mike Flanagan has proven himself over the last couple of years to be one of the most refreshing and energizing horror directors in modern horror, with projects like Absentia, Oculus, Gerald's Game, and of course The Haunting of Hill House. As most will know, Gerald's Game is yet another adaptation of a Stephen King novel, with the story following a woman named Jess who, after some bedroom play goes wrong with her husband Gerald, finds herself handcuffed to the bed with no one around for help. Now in the novel and film, Jessie eventually escapes by slicing the skin off her hand in order to slide out of the handcuffs, and Flanagan didn't forget this while directing Doctor Sleep, with there being a small reference to Jessie's ingenuity. In Doctor Sleep, Rose the Hat falls into a trap while trying to invade Abra's mind. The file cabinet of Abra's memories slams shut on Rose's hand as Abra toys with her, and like Jessie, Rose rips the skin off her hand in order to escape. It's just as disgusting. And finally, coming in at number 1, future Stephen King adaptations. As we know, Doctor Sleep itself is a sequel to The Shining to be specific, and Flanagan doesn't exactly leave much of the story left untold by the time the credits roll. The Overlook has burned down and the True Knot has been destroyed, Danny Torrance has died, and Abra is the strongest Shine user around. However, there is a line of dialogue spoken by the ghostly Dan that could hint to an upcoming TV project. While saying goodbye, Dan tells Abra to shine on because the world needs people who stand. Stephen King has a novel called The Stand, which has been adapted previously, first as a 1994 television miniseries. Dan's message might be a reference to the new Stand TV series, which will be premiering on CBS All Access. It's hoping. In at number 10, Stan Lee. Captain Marvel opened with a heartfelt tribute to the late Stan Lee, who passed away last year. Instead of the usual Marvel logo, the comic panels were replaced with all of Lee's MCU movie appearances as a lovely send-off to the Marvel creator. As we know, Lee is infamous for making cameos in all of the MCU films, with Captain Marvel being one of the last he appeared in. However, producer Kevin Feige said on the red carpet that Lee has one more cameo coming up, which we assume will be in Avengers Endgame, set to be released in April. So, what exactly was Lee's cameo in Captain Marvel? Well, he appeared as one of the passengers on the train Carol is on while hunting down hidden scrolls. He can be seen reading the screenplay to the 90s cult hit Mallrats, which was released in October 1995. In at number 9, Kelly Sue DeConnick. Continuing on the subway, another Marvel veteran makes an appearance, this time on the platform of the station. As Carol exits the train, she walks past a woman with bright red hair and cool glasses. This is Kelly Sue DeConnick, the writer of Captain Marvel from 2012 to 2015, and is largely responsible for the character's growing popularity. Coming in at number 8, Smile More. During the scene where Carol is hunting for inconspicuous clothing outside of a vintage store, a biker tells Carol to smile, which is likely a reference to not just the reality of street harassment towards women, but is also a reference to the weird complaints Brie Larson received during the promotional tour of the movie, in which people stated that she didn't smile in any of the promotional material. I mean, chill guys, she can be happy on the inside. In at number 7, 90s references. With Captain Marvel being set in the 90s, you can bet there were bucket loads of classic 90s references scattered about the film, not just Blockbuster. During one scene, Fury makes a laser tag reference when referring to Captain Marvel's Kree getup. Instead of it directly referring to the game laser tag, could actually be referring to the brand laser tag, a brand that peaked in the late 80s. Although this could be an out of touch reference considering the film takes place around 1995 if the Smashing Pumpkins license posters or anything to go by, but still, it's a cool little nod to a slick brand. Coming in at number 6, the Kree. No, the Kree themselves are not the Easter egg, you can breathe a sigh of relief. However, some characters from previous MCU films do pop up, many that fans have forgotten ever existed. As we know, the Kree are the alien civilization from the planet Hala, the planet Carol has been residing on for the past 6 years. The race are ruled by an artificial life form known as the Supreme Intelligence, an AI that takes on the form of the person you admire the most. Now, the Kree first appear in the MCU in Guardians of the Galaxy, and 2 fan favourites from that film make an appearance in Captain Marvel, Ronan the Accuser and Karath the Pursuer, the latter being a member of Yon-Rog's elite Star Force team and eventually becoming a member of Ronan's gang by the time Guardians takes place. Coming in at 5, Goose. We finally got to find out the story of Goose, the adorable cat who appeared in the trailer, and who makes an appearance in the comics, but under a different name, Chewie. Now, Goose isn't actually a cat, but a Flurkin, an alien kitty that expels tentacles from its mouth. Now, in the film, Goose seemingly hates everyone who isn't Carol. However, he does take quite the liking to Fury, which leads us into our next number. Coming in at number 4, Fury's eye. Finally, we got to see how the S.H.I.E.L.D. captain lost his precious eye, and honestly, it was not what we were expecting. Fury had previously stated that the last time he trusted someone, he lost an eye, and we have Goose to thank for that. Fury forms a bond with Goose, but when Goose lashes out, he scratches Fury's eye, resulting in the eye patch we see in the rest of the MCU films. Coming in at number 3, Monica Rambeau. So, Captain Marvel introduces MCU fans to a new cast of characters that only comic fans know, one of them being Monica Rambeau, the 11-year-old daughter of Carol's best friend, Maria Rambeau, a fellow US Air Force pilot. Now, Monica is a hugely important character in Captain Marvel's history, however, she is just as important in her own right, carrying the Captain Marvel mantle before Carol Danvers ever did in the 1982 comic Amazing Spider-Man Annual Volume 1 Issue 16. Coming in at number 2, Avengers. At the end of Captain Marvel, we finally get the reveal of how the Avengers initiative came to be. We get to see Nick Fury put together a new initiative for S.H.I.E.L.D. dubbed the Protector Initiative. However, after he takes a look at an old picture of Carol Danvers next to her Air Force jet with her call sign, Carol Avenger Danvers, he becomes inspired to change the name. And finally in at number 1, Yon-Rogg and Mar-Vell. Our biggest question was finally answered. Will Yon-Rogg and Mar-Vell both appear in the film? And more importantly, who will play them? Well, we got our answer, with Jude Law taking on the role of Yon-Rogg, and in a shocking turn of events, Annette Bening taking on the role of Mar-Vell. Bening plays Dr. Wendy Lawson, an undercover agent sent by the Kree to study the Tesseract on Earth, with her Kree name being Mar-Vell. As we know, Mar-Vell is the reason Carol gets her powers, and that doesn't change in the film. Only this time they come to her through an engine cord that is shot and blasts Carol, giving her her powers.